Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Fantasy Points pre-draft live stream here at fantasypoints.com, YouTube, Twitter, wherever the hell you're watching. It's good to be with you. My name is Joe Dolan. We have Graham Barfield and Scott Barrett with us as we talk running backs. And we'll mix in a little tight ends at the end as well. But we're going to talk running backs before the 2022 NFL draft here. Scott's production model, Graham's yards created model, where they agree, where they differ. I'm just along for the ride. I hope everybody is having a great time, and it is also a great time to sign up to fantasypoints.com. There's so much going on. We have our draft hub on our main page, which includes our prospect guide with Greg Cosell, which is a little bit of an extra charge, and we'll get to that. But we got Scott's rookie model. We've got Graham's yards created profiles. We have Wes Huber's dynasty profiles. All of that available on the website. And if you are a visual person or an audio person, well, we've got you covered as well. Thursday through Saturday for the NFL draft, we've got coverage at fantasypoints.com and on our YouTube channel. Scott, you with Wes Huber and Nick are going to be hosting on Thursday. Round one, you'll have some special guests in there as well. Coverage starts at 7:30 before the first round of the NFL draft. Friday coverage starts at 6:30 with me, Tom Brawley, and Graham. Saturday coverage starts at 12. That's noon Eastern time with Scott, Wes Huber, and Jake Tribby on youtube.com/fantasypoints. Subscribe, hit the notification button, all that good stuff. Rate and review. We really appreciate it. On top of all that, we've got giveaways coming up each day of the NFL draft. On Thursday, we have a Ryan Tannehill autographed jersey, an Onyx Vintage 2021 College Football Auto Cards box. On Friday, we have the Miles Sanders autographed mini helmet with the Onyx Vintage 2021 College Football Auto Cards box. On Saturday, we have a Roy Williams autographed Texas Longhorns photo poster for all you Longhorn fans, and Leaf Memories College Football Autographs card box. For giveaways, head to Twitter, be on the lookout for the giveaway tweet from our Twitter handle at FantasyPTS, and tune in to be eligible to win. We're doing all of those giveaways. And then finally, for today through Saturday only, use the promo code COSELL22 for an additional 10% off the prospect guide only. It's not eligible for discount to other plans or add-ons, but believe me, you want to get in with the Greg Cosell prospect guide. We have a staff mock draft, Wes Huber's Devy prospects, which are guys who aren't yet eligible for the NFL draft, and just so you can get a step up on that as well. I literally stopped putting more Cosell profiles in the guide simply to record this show, guys. He is literally sending them to me as we speak. We're now at over 160 profiles from one guy who has started watching these guys in January. That's how hard Cosell has been working, and he's great at transitioning them to the NFL. Okay, there is so much going on. Let's talk running backs, and this program might have a little bit more of a shelf life, Scott, because, well, we might not see one, and if we do see any go on Thursday night, it's going to be likely just one, Breece Hall being the heavy favorite. But let's talk Breece Hall to lead off, Scott. Number one, let's introduce your model and how important production is to transitioning these guys to the NFL, and then let's start talking Breece Hall. Scott, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. What's going on, guys? So my model works in multiple phases. The first one is just looking at production, looking at efficiency. What are the most predictive variables at each position? A key efficiency metric is missed tackles forced per touch. That's really one of the more predictive variables we have. And it looks at a number of different stuff. What was most interesting to me was as you know, my general draft strategy when it comes to the running back position, and especially in dynasty leagues, is I'm very bell cow or bust. I really want the highest end running backs who are both used heavily as a runner and a receiver. They're not really ceding work to another scat back or an early down workhorse. They're really just hogging all of the touches to themselves. And then if you're not that, I really don't want to waste draft capital on you. I don't want to waste draft capital on the Alexander Madisons, a handcuff, the James Whites, a scat back, or just one of these early down workhorses who never catches targets and is therefore extremely game script dependent and inconsistent on a week-to-week basis and has a capped upside. So that was always my bias. It was just really interesting to see that my production and efficiency model really does have the same bias. And so, if Kyren Williams turns out to be like 85% of James White, but I have him as a UDFA, that's not necessarily a miss. And like, I think that's right. I don't think that is a miss. It's really gravitating towards paying a heavy premium on upside, on bell cow upside. And I think that's the right way to look about it. That was purely incidental, but I like that. And then the second phase of the model just incorporates athleticism, which is a little overrated for running backs, but still pretty important, more important than for wide receivers. And luckily, if you look at the top two running backs in this class, who everyone has as the top two, they're both hyper athletic. So that's nice to see. You want me to dig into Breece Hall here, my RB1?
Well, first and foremost, let's go to Graham so he can outline his yards created profile, which we should have to compare and contrast. Because Scott, this is just flat out pump the numbers in, let the toaster oven spit out the finished product, okay, and then you do your tweaks. But you have your ingredients for that. Graham, you're more of the tape grinding, even though yards created is a metric. This is something that you get using your own eyes. Ergo, it's going to be more of a subjective kind of analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely way more subjective. I mean, Scott's stuff is really cool. And, it kind of gives you like the background on production and stuff. But yeah, mine is just like, I'm watching, 6-7 games of these guys at the end of the year, or at the end of their careers, I should say. And yeah, I mean, just charting, every running down snap, every passing down snap. So yeah, it's cool. We got the the blend here going between strictly data and strictly film, which obviously my stuff gets turned into the data too. So
yeah. So let's talk. Scott talked some correlations. Correlations for your model. How well does it correlate to fantasy success? Who are some of its biggest hits in terms of not just this thing predicted Saquon Barkley was going to be good, or Christian McCaffrey was going to be good, but maybe somebody who the league was higher on that your metric was lower on, that maybe was kind of a hit for you.
Oh man, Saquon Barkley, what should have been with him, man?
Injuries.
Yeah, I know. It's just brutal. I mean, he was the best running back prospect maybe ever. In terms of correlation, yards created beats like any production, like single production metric, like rushing yards per game, yards per carry. I'm sure Scott can talk way more about this about the combine, but the combine is like just like so noisy. Yards created easily beats the combine too. Some of the bigger hits like Kareem Hunt was probably the biggest one that wasn't just like you said, just a top tier prospect. Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara was really high on Alvin Kamara too. I think it did a good job outlining even some of the elite guys like Barkley and JT too. So definitely have had some misses. Anthony McFarland being one of them, Darrell Henderson maybe being one, Joe Williams certainly being one. He's another injury guy. But yeah, all in all, it's definitely been more predictive than I expected.
Let's get into individual prospects, because we're going to have to talk this. You guys have a different number one, though your top two is not different. And I think it's probably in your mind, Graham, probably a little closer than in Scott's, because Scott's accounts for production. That's Breece Hall, and Breece Hall has the edge in a production model, Scott, over Kenneth Walker, my guess, strongly based on receiving traits, which Breece Hall showed in spades, and Kenneth Walker wasn't asked to show at all.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty close for me. I could certainly envision some scenarios where, maybe in an ideal landing spot and a poor landing spot for Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker can leapfrog him. And, my article comes out a couple of weeks after the draft, where I watch all post-draft press conferences where GMs are atypically honest. And, maybe they'll say, no, we love Kenneth Walker as our passing down back too. We think he's a bell cow, and it's like a perfect landing spot. I'm cautiously optimistic on his pass catching potential. I think it is close. But no, I'm not taking Walker over Breece Hall, and I'm happy to draft Breece Hall as the 101. And again, he's like a guaranteed bell cow, where with Kenneth Walker, it's more of a question mark at the very least. What Breece Hall had, he had phenomenal production and the important kinds of production. He wasn't extremely hyper efficient on a per touch basis, but he was very like well above average in terms of hyper efficiency. Since 2000, there's only been 7 Power 5 running backs to eclipse 145 yards from scrimmage per game across multiple seasons. Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, Adrian Peterson, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, and 2 others. If you look at the leaders by total missed tackles forced per season since 2014, it's Jonathan Taylor 1, David Montgomery 2, Breece Hall 3, AJ Dillon 4, Dalvin Cook 5, Saquon Barkley 6. He has the pass catching numbers. They're not, super eye popping or wowing, but they're really strong. For instance, he joins Saquon, Dalvin, Christian McCaffrey as the only other Power 5 running backs to average over 100 rushing yards per game and 20 receiving yards per game across his career. He did this while competing for touches alongside Kenny Nwangwu, who's 3.5 years older and a future 4th-round pick. That guy never saw touches. He immediately supplanted David Montgomery at Iowa State, and his numbers were superior in almost every single metric. And then as the final cherry on top is he wasn't just the most athletic running back in this class, but he's one of the most athletic running backs of all time. Top 90th to 95th percentile numbers in the 40, the speed score, vertical jump, broad jump. According to my metric, over the last 5 combines, only 4 running backs have ever earned a better SPORK score, which is my, custom athleticism score. Saquon Barkley, AJ Dillon, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, and then Breece Hall. So really excited about him and his potential.
Graham, what did you see from Breece Hall on tape? And then we're going to get into a really good discussion about Kenneth Walker. But what did you see from Breece Hall, who is actually your number 2 in this class based on yards created?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Scott and I come at it from a slightly different angle, being, his is production-based, mine's film-based. We can talk Walker here in a second. But, yeah, Breece is a really good player, man. All the athletic traits that Scott was listing shows up on tape. Great speed, great home run speed. I think he's got great bursts inside of like 2 to 5 yards. Great elusiveness, and he's very, very powerful. Like he's, what is he, Scott? 217, 215, something like that. And he runs like he's 225, 230. He's going to be immediately a 3rd down, 3rd short back and red zone back. But for a player of his caliber, there's just a few too many plays where I felt like he towed the line between being overly patient and hesitant. And, for a player of his caliber, you don't want to see, a guy running into the back of his offensive lineman. And I don't know if it was a processing thing. I'm not sure if he was just, he is a patient runner in general. If he was just being overly patient, he got away with it a lot in college, especially at Iowa State against some of that competition because he was the best athlete on the field. But yeah, I don't think he's just like this rubber stamp blue chip prospect like we've seen from JT and Zeke and Barkley in the past. He's a very, very good player. And I definitely see the argument for him being number 1. Especially because he's already a much better pass catcher than Kenneth Walker, much more proven pass catcher than Kenneth Walker. But that being said, I don't think he's just like this rubber stamp blue chip prospect.
So let's now go to Kenneth Walker because, Scott, your article when you broke down your running back model had some of the most like mind-blowing stats about running backs in the pass game that I can really remember because of how we now think of guys like this. But you're talking guys like Ray Rice and Darren Sproles were averaging like 9 or 10 receiving yards per game in college. And like those guys were some of the most dynamic players we've seen in the NFL. Just this past year, not to say that this guy's Darren Sproles, but AJ Dillon, who was never asked to catch the ball at Boston College, proved to be a pretty darn good receiver for the Green Bay Packers. So when you're talking about your production model and then transitioning guys to the NFL, how much weight do you put on that pass catching? How has that changed in recent years? And to top it all off, how does that relate to Kenneth Walker in your model?
Yeah, so raw receptions is not something I typically look at. It's not very predictive. What's more predictive, interestingly, is missed tackles forced per reception. And you really saw that with someone like Clyde Edwards-Helaire or a LaMichael Pirine, who had a high number of raw receptions.
Najee Harris, man. Najee Harris was like a hit for that, major hit.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that makes, there's actually one running back both Graham and I like, who we'll talk about in a little bit, who did really well there. But that was so he didn't have that either going for him. He really just was never targeted in the passing game. And previous running backs, Darren Sproles, Le'Veon Bell, Ray Rice, LaDainian Tomlinson, Melvin Gordon, Jonathan Taylor, A.J. Dillon, rarely utilized in the passing game in college. And I think with those last three running backs in particular, that's due to something like scheme stubbornness. And so this question is of massive importance, because targets are worth 2.64 times as much as a carry in PPR league. I do have this bias, but just because he wasn't asked to do this doesn't mean he can't do it. So let's get into why he wasn't asked to do it. Well, for one thing, he spent his first 2 seasons at Wake Forest under Dave Clawson. Since Clawson joined the team in 2014, Wake Forest ranks dead last among all Power 5 teams in running back receptions and receiving yards, 2 to 2.5 times below the Power 5 average rate in both categories. And then Michigan State kind of has the exact same thing going on, where they've rarely utilized running backs in the passing game, but he was utilized in the passing game in high school, and he was hyper productive, hyper efficient. But let's not talk about, the one question mark with his game. Let's talk about why he is so exciting. So this class reminds me a lot of the 2016 season, where you had the one bell cow RB at the top in Zeke Elliott. Then you had the better pure runner with pass catching question marks in Derrick Henry. And there wasn't really anything beyond them. Certainly no long-term starters, except for a random Jordan Howard in round 6 or whatever it was. But I mean, this guy transferred from Wake Forest, wasn't really on a lot of people's radar. Michigan State in 2020 went 2-5. They averaged just 91.7 rushing yards per game. They hadn't had a 1,000-yard rusher since 2014. And then Walker joins the team, is immediately the starter, which doesn't often happen for transfers. Was immediately the starter. The team went 11-2. He had over 1,600 rushing yards, 18 rushing touchdowns. And it's like, what changed? It was the same coaching staff, the same offense, the same offensive line. They didn't have a single player drafted in last year's draft class. And overnight, this became one of the top teams in the country. And he was a rare running back that mattered. He ranked 6th in Heisman voting. By all of the rushing metrics I typically look at, no running back had as impressive a season as Kenneth Walker's 2021 season by rushing yards after contact, by missed tackles forced, by yards per carry, all these different efficiency metrics, really impressive. I'm eager to hear what Graham has to say on Walker and who his comp is for him.
And Graham, you love Kenneth Walker.
Oh baby, I love some Kenneth Walker. 91st percentile in yards created per attempt, led the class by a mile in missed tackles forced per attempt. And like Scott said earlier, I mean, missed tackles forced is like one of the best ways to not really truly divorce offensive line from running back play, but it's definitely one of the best signals, if not the best signal we have. Walker was a baller. In that sense, he's got these just like little jump cuts that he can make at full speed. There's just a level of mastery he has to his game that Brees doesn't. And that's not a knock on Brees, but it's just, in terms of just running ability, Walker this past year, man, was excellent. Scott, you texted me a couple nights ago for my comp for him, and I basically said he's like a smaller Joe Mixon in terms of play style. Mixon's way bigger, 6 foot. I think he's 6 foot even, 225, 230. Walker's 5'10", 212, 215, something like that. so he's smaller, but in terms of the way they play and the way they win with the just like nasty jump cuts, being able to accelerate on a dime, I don't know. And their yards created data was pretty similar too in terms of both yards created and missed tackles for. So yeah, man, I have Walker at RB1 just because I think his traits like are incredible as a runner. And like Scott was saying, there's so many backs that we've seen throughout the years that, you know, don't have any production as a receiver, but that doesn't mean they can't do it. Those are two very separate things. Yeah, man, I think we're going to see Walker go pretty early on day 2.
Yeah, I think
you know what's interesting is something else that's predictive for college running backs to get targets in NFL is hyper efficiency, hyper productivity in the running game, because like
just getting on the field, like literally just
exactly.
Just get on the field. And Kenneth Walker is a guy, dude. He's gonna get 8. Like if you dropped him in any NFL offense right now, he could get 18 carries, like easy. And that I'm with you on that. It makes so much sense.
So Breece Hall, his comp by Matt Bowen, by Lance Zierlein, and a few others was Matt Forte, which really gets the juices flowing, an all-time bell cow. Kenneth Walker, so we talked about Hall's athleticism. Walker also an extremely hyper-athletic running back, further cementing him as the clear RB2 in this class and a pretty great running back prospect overall. Like you said, he's short, he's 5'9", but he's thick at 211 pounds. His 40-yard dash time ranks 29th best since 2000. Speed score ranks 49th best since 2000. 79th percentile in the broad. So you stack him up, his what he ran in these events and his height, his weight, and his BMI. That puts him in sort of the, which is really interesting to me, the LaDainian Tomlinson, D'Angelo Williams, Maurice Jones-Drew archetype. DeAndre Swift maybe in there too. Of course, only talking about upside comps, but just in terms of height, weight, and athleticism, that's where he sort of falls in.
That's interesting. Now let's get to some of the day 2, day 3 type of running backs. And this is where all kinds of guys differ. Scott, I'm going to let you kick it off. You pick what running back we talk about here from your day 2, maybe a guy that you like, that your production model liked, who probably won't go on day 1, might not go until the 3rd round, but who is somebody your production model liked who transitions well to the NFL?
So again, like I said at the top, I don't know that there's another starting caliber running back in this class. And I think there's maybe 5 guys who could have that sort of upside. They're all going to go like round 3 in the NFL draft. But my model and I both liked Brian Robinson as the clear RB3. Again, my model has a bias. I have this bias in favor of bell cow running backs. Just really liked his bell cow upside. What was really interesting was I had Jim Nagy, director of the Senior Bowl, on our podcast, and he told me that he spoke with people in Alabama last year who said he was better than Najee Harris. And he was like, I know that because I asked that, and I asked that because I felt the same way. And so, so he was my RB3. He was my clear RB3. And I heard that and I felt good about that. So I haven't really wavered from that. But I've basically been saying he's sort of like Alexander Madison 2.0 to me. If he earns day 2 capital and winds up on a team devoid of RB talent, I am really excited. And I think he can get it done for fantasy. Or if he's Alexander Madison and like behind a Dalvin Cook who gets injured, he could fill in seamlessly and put up some numbers. But can he be a true starter out of the gates? I'm not so sure, but that's what I think about Brian Robinson.
Going to borrow a term from Greg Cosell here: team and scheme specific.
There you go.
He wrote in his profile, which is in our prospect guide, the more I watched, and I watched a lot of tape on Robinson, the more I liked him as an NFL back. And here's the kicker: he has feature back size and traits. He is a big motherfucker, by the way, 6'2", 225. And it would not surprise me at all if some teams had him as the number 1 back on their board. Graham, did you see that from Brian Robinson?
Number 1 back, man. That's Knowing Cosell, that's pretty strong praise.
I think he's just looking at his traits and saying, for the type of team you are, like, would Tennessee have Brian Robinson as their top back?
Yeah.
Like, not that they're going to take him in the first round, but like, I think that's what he was getting at based on his traits.
No, that makes sense. And I kind of wrote this up too. Like, he's kind of good at everything, but doesn't have like one calling card. Like Breece Hall has breakaway speed, amazing receiver. Kenneth Walker is the best runner in the class. Brian Robinson's none of that, but he's just good at kind of everything. He's a good inside runner. He's a big dude, like you just said. I think he's got better burst than people have given him credit for. And he wasn't just a product of the Bama offensive line. He finished 4th in this class, according to my charting, in missed tackles force. So that's something you like to see. Great pass protector. I know I've said this a million times, but that doesn't really move the needle for me very much. But it is one thing that will get him on the field and earn him snaps, because we know
it moves the needle for coaches, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, coaches care about that kind of stuff. Yeah, and Robinson's he's a fine pass catcher. He's not Najee Harris by any stretch, but he's a good pass catcher. I think he's a guy, like Scott says. We want guys in fantasy that can have 3-down skill sets, and I think if you put Brian Robinson on the Falcons right now, he could play all 3 downs for them.
Yeah, and what do I call it? Came up with this term like kind of on the fly last year. I call it Janice's razor. It doesn't matter how much you fucking like a guy. If the coach doesn't play him, he's not going to score fantasy points. In
that case, it's Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, but that's what I call it. So if a guy can block and it's going to get him on the field, more power to him. He's going to be out there playing. It's my turn. No, Graham, no. Let's do this. We had Scott pick a guy to talk about. Now let's have you pick a guy to talk about. You start, and then we'll go to Scott for the production model. A guy who maybe you are a little bit higher on than Scott.
Can I just ask Graham a question really quick?
Please do.
So
this is what this is.
You brought up Brian Robinson's height, that he's a big boy. 6'2", 225. Unfortunately, like a 9th percentile 3-cone, which was really not good.
Yeah.
But what do you think? What are your thoughts on running back height? So like RAS, math bomb stat, like the taller you are, the higher your score is going to be. But I kind of wanted to go the opposite way, where if you're over maybe 6 foot, I'm going to penalize you for that, just because the hit rate on running backs who are over 6 foot is really not good. It's like Brandon Jacobs and Derrick Henry, and then a whole bunch of busts. And this year's class is littered with running backs who are 6 foot or above. I think there's 10 in this year's class, like when usually there's like 1, if that. And I talking to some of my PFF buddies, maybe it's just like easier to bring you down at the knees, or they tend to run more stiff or upright. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I lean more towards you, that like I maybe mentally ding taller backs a little bit. He is an upright runner, but like I said, I think he's got just enough burst to make it work. My comp for him and Jerome Ford is like at the high end, these guys are like James Conner. Like James Conner is also tall. He's 6'1", 6'2", 230, something like that, 240. We've seen it in glimpses, but like in general, I want my backs to be a little shorter. It's also easier to get, hidden behind the offensive line, just to, make those second level defenders miss too. It's nothing that Robinson obviously can control, but
I like him short and thick.
Short and thick with 3 C's.
Is it really that? Has there really been that a dearth of 6 foot and plus running backs? Because Le'Veon Bell's 6'1".
DeMarco Murray
is 6 foot. Mixon's 6'1", isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's 6 even. DeMarco Murray was over 6 feet tall too, right?
Yeah. Joe Mixon's 6 foot and 3/4. Yeah, that's interesting now that I think about it, because when I think of some of the most dominant backs in NFL history, and I mean, I understand I'm going back to a bygone era. I mean, Eric Dickerson was 6'3".
Right.
But I mean, it's unfair, I think, to compare Brian Robinson to Eric Dickerson, who was an absolute freak show. But Adrian Peterson's 6'2". But I mean, I guess maybe those are outlier guys. But I mean, I think when you think archetype running back, you probably think more of the Emmitt Smith kind of build, which is 5'10", 212, something around there.
Yeah, and that's the way the game's gone, is 5'10", 210.
And that's the way Kenneth Walker's built, by the way.
Yeah. Kenneth Walker's got that build. My RB3 in this class is Damien Pierce from Florida. Scott's been mentioning this too. I mean, I think I've taken it even further than him. I think this depth in this class is just bad. Like, it's just not. It's just there's a bunch of guys with like interesting skill sets, but no one really has it put together. I think Damien Pierce might be the one guy who can put it all together. Fourth in this class in yards created per attempt. He was second behind Kenneth Walker in missed tackles forced. Good pass catcher, good pass protector too. I have no idea what Dan Mullins and that staff was doing. I mean, the dude would get, one carry in the second quarter, take it for 15 yards, and then you wouldn't see him again until the third quarter. It was the most asinine thing I've seen in terms of usage since like Alvin Kamara at Tennessee. It just made no sense. And we have a history with the staff. Like Kadarius Toney, Van Jefferson were both misused in my opinion at Florida too. So I don't really ding Dame Pierce too much for that. At the end of the day, I mean, we have a laundry list of running backs that have very, very little production to Pierce, just like Pierce, and a ton of busts. So he's by no means a perfect prospect.
So landing spot dependent. First and foremost, I want you guys to take a look at something. Would you look at this over here?
We're boring them to sleep.
What's on over here?
We're boring them to sleep. What, Damien Pierce isn't getting the blood moving for your pup?
Crimp it. You all right, baby? Anyway, Damien Pierce, Scott, what did your model say on him? Obviously, for a production model, not exactly a guy who's going to pop off the page.
Yeah, so what was really interesting about this one is Lance Zierlein wrote or said on a podcast very early on that the fact that he didn't have twice as many touches was a fireable offense for the coaching staff. And guess what? It turns out he was right. The head coach got fired before the last game of the season. And so when I was playing around with my model, I just asked myself, okay, like what would happen if I just doubled his touches and his production in his final season? And he would jump all the way up to RB3 and like very close to RB2. And that's because he was insanely hyper efficient. It was just the lack of touches, which my model has a bias against because, again, it wants bell cow running backs. If Damien Pierce doesn't have the requisite size, if coaches don't think he can ever get more than like 12 touches per game, it's going to be low on him, as it should be low on him. But his 2021 season ranks fourth best among all Power 5 running backs since 2014 in missed tackles forced per touch, third best in missed tackles forced per attempt, fourth best in career missed tackles forced per reception on a top 5 list with Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery, Sony Michel, Zach Moss. He averaged a touchdown once every 7.4 touches last season. That ranks second best since 2000, behind only Percy Harvin. So just really impressive hyper efficiency. And like I said, if I just double those numbers, he skyrockets all the way up to RB3. And me, I'm a big fan of upside, very risk tolerant of risk. And so my model much lower on him, but I put him somewhere in the middle between those two rankings with like a greater emphasis on that upside. And I felt like that was confirmed to me when I had Jim Nagy on the podcast, who went out of his way before I even asked to say, no, this is a bell cow running back. He should have had more touches, and heavily hinting that the reason why might have been that there was another running back who was sort of chirpy and not a team player who demanded his touches, or he would transfer, and Pierce was sort of a much more of a team player. I mean, that it's a little conspiratorial, a little like reading between the lines, but if you watch the podcast, I think that would be your takeaway too.
Interesting to note on Damien Pierce. Let's go with what Greg Cosell said. And obviously Cosell evaluates these guys completely independent of anybody else. Pierce is an attitude runner with an urgent competitive feel to every run, and there is no question that Pierce any given week can be a volume back. But my sense is he cannot do that week in and week out given his limitations unless he was in an offense like the Chargers, where the number one back might get 170 to 190 carries, which is certainly plenty for fantasy. There is much more to get from Pierce as a receiver, and that will enhance his value as you project and transition him to the NFL. That, of course, would present Pierce as a viable long yardage and third down back. So also a player Greg Cosell liked. This guy is starting to really – he was a guy I heard nothing about, and it seems like now people have kind of caught up in the last week plus about Damien Pierce. Like, they're like, yeah, this guy could be something at the next level. Very interesting player.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, in general, I think everybody's like consensus RB3 going into the last couple of weeks was Isaiah Spiller. And then everybody like kind of quickly figured out like he's not a good athlete. I think Scott's a little lower on him too. I mean, his production was good at Texas A&M, but did not score well in yards created either. I mean, I think everybody's kind of like looking for a fun, back in like the second tier. And I think Damien Pierce and James Cook too are those two guys.
Yeah, let's talk Spiller first. Because and let's start with you, Scott, on Isaiah Spiller, because I think Cosell saw the positives in his tape, but your model, I'll let you guys first take a dump on Isaiah Spiller before I move back here and have what Mr. Cosell had to say.
I just want to say one more thing on Damien Pierce, because again, I do like him. I'm very high on him. I have him above Isaiah Spiller, for instance. But had his 3-cone come at the combine, it would have ranked sixth worst since 2000, tied with Brandon Jacobs, who's 50 pounds heavier, which is crazy because like when you watch him on tape, you really don't see that. But it was a potential like death knell 3-cone. I decided to just ignore it. I like him. I like his tape. I like the upside argument I made. And guys like Jim Nagy are hyping him up. But, yeah, that was rough.
Remember Dalvin Cook's combine?
Yeah, he had a shit combine too.
Yeah, but his 3-cone was significantly better than Damien Pierce's. It was like 10th, 11th percentile, where Pierce's like 2nd percentile.
Yeah. Real quick, not to go off too deep of a tangent, why don't running backs do the 3-cone anymore? Like I can't find anything on it.
I wonder if there's something where like you train for both the 40 and the 3-cone, and it makes the time spent on the 3-cone working those muscles takes like 0.01 off of your 40. So agents tell their players not to even do it because all NFL teams supposedly care about is the 40. I don't really know, but it's a very predictive metric in my model for smaller running backs. Like Damien Pierce, he's heavy enough so that it's not a huge deal. But for skinnier running backs, it's really important. Like the Tyler Goodsons of the world, he had an all-time great 3-cone and he like skyrocketed up in my athleticism model. But
what's funny is because I would think NFL teams probably know that the 40 doesn't mean shit for running backs.
I mean, I always say it's like a baseline. As long as your guy doesn't run a 4.7, which Isaiah Spiller might have if he did run at the combine, as long as your guy doesn't run a 4.7, like you're good. 4.6 and below. Like if you're Damien Pierce ran a 4.59 at 218. There's a laundry list of running backs that ran 4.6.
I don't give a shit about that. Kareem Hunt ran a 4.64. And
that was actually my comp for Damien Pierce. They have the same exact measurables. It's crazy.
Yeah, just like Kareem Hunt ran a 4.64, and I remember everybody on Twitter being like, "Oh my god!" And I think I just remember I was like, "No, I'm not doing it. I'm sticking with what I saw." Like that. I think
Kamara ran like a 4.59 too, Joe.
Who did?
Kamara, I think it was 4.58, 4.59.
And look, I think it's like when a guy like a Breece Hall runs sub 4.4, okay, your eyes open up. When a guy runs a 4.8, okay, your eyes open up. But like it's just that doesn't bother me. Anyway, let's talk Isaiah Spiller. Graham, what did you see? And then we'll get to Scott's production model on him.
Yeah, just real quick. Very good pass catcher. Texas A&M used him in a bunch of like crucial situations. They used him in gotta have it third downs in the red zone. Good hands. I think he's good enough as a separator to beat linebackers at the second level. I don't think he's athletic enough to like play outside and beat corners though, like James Cook could. The problem with Spiller, man, is he's just not a creative player. Like his yards created is 3rd percentile all time in my database. He was also 3rd worst in this class in missed tackles forced per carry, which is not good because this class is pretty weak overall. And he tested really poorly too. I mean, I typically don't like ding backs that are like slightly below average athletes. But in this case, I mean, Spiller was really, really bad. Scott can speak more to that. But overall, man, I just didn't see a player who can consistently win at the next level and force missed tackles and all of that. I don't know. I think he's more of just like a passing down, change of pace kind of guy.
What did the models show on Spiller, Scott?
Yeah, it really didn't like him. He ranked 6th in the class, and then he had a historically poor pro day performance, and so I'm going to have him RB7. And I that makes me a little nervous because all the top mock drafters are saying he's going to go early round 2. He could be even RB2 in this class for a lot of teams. But I'm just going to go ahead and disagree and agree with Graham. That makes me certainly feel better. Just he had breakout age, but breakout age isn't really important for the running back position. And he never substantially improved in his freshman season, and his 2021 season was by far his most efficient. And according to Graham, it wasn't that impressive. And, I saw the same things. Impressed by yards after contact per attempt, ranked 12th best in missed tackles forced per attempt last season. But like those are the only two meaningful metrics I can use to argue in his favor, and then factor in a near sub 25th percentile pro day. I'm just not that high on him.
Greg Cosell said Spiller's 2020 and 2021 tape, which was fun to watch, definitively showed a runner with a feature foundation volume back traits profile, including size, compact build, patience, vision, short area burst, subtle lateral quickness in confined space, natural power, contact balance, physicality, finishing toughness, and a partridge in a pear tree. So
you're fluent in Cassell speak.
Yes.
Fun to watch is a B-, whereas most intriguing to watch is an A+.
Yeah, intriguing, I think, if I'm translating Cosell, intriguing is I see a lot of traits here, but I'm not 100% sure how he's going to translate to the NFL. But he likes them. Fun to watch means the guy's an asshole in a good way, just like he's competitive. Like Isaiah Spiller is gonna. Cosell says he's looking to peel the paint off your helmet.
Dude, he is competitive as shit, man. Like he seeks out contact, but I don't think that's a good thing in running backs. Like you want to avoid the contact. Like you don't want to hit guys. Like I don't know.
Like the guy who like a team might see him and say, "We're gonna get 18 to 20 easily defined runs out of this guy in a game," and I think that's the way he feels about him. Scott, let's go to James Cook because he is one of my favorite backs in this class. It seems like he's the kind of guy, just based on guys I've been talking to, who NFL teams are going to like more than maybe like the consensus big boards are. He's obviously Dalvin Cook's brother. He doesn't have the same profile, but he does the kind of things that are going to get him on the field in the modern NFL game.
My model didn't love him. It liked Rashad White's pass catching efficiency and bell cow upside significantly more. I mean, to be fair to James Cook so he has projected round 3 draft capital. Zamir White has projected round 3 draft capital, and they were competing against each other in the same offense. So yeah, of course they were lacking in touches. Once you factor that in, the only thing I'll say is that was the same thing for the 2 UNC backs last year. My model significantly preferred the 2 UNC backs. I think James Cook lacks ideal size for the position. I think that's really, you run the risk that he's going to get pigeonholed into a scat back only role. Although some NFL teams have been comping him to Alvin Kamara, saying you could split him out wide and use him as like a wide receiver for a handful of snaps per game. And it's like, okay, wow. When you talk about that, that's like special, peak Darren Sproles, that one awesome Theo Riddick season type of upside. But yeah, I'm going to be a little bit lower on him than consensus. He's just not a bell cow, What do you think, Graham?
Yeah, it's just that's the big red flag is he's undersized. Really undersized. I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that you're going to give like, Kamara is like thicker in the lower half. Cook is skinny, like real skinny in the lower half. So I don't know, man. I think you can deploy them similarly, but in terms of volume, like you don't want, Alvin Kamara can get, 18, 20 carries a game. I don't see James Cook doing that, but he was second in this class in yards created per attempt, but like Scott said, really small sample. I mean, he was only getting 5, 6, 7 carries a game, and they were like schemed up carries too. It wasn't like he was just getting, inside zone stuff. I mean, they were looking to get the ball in space with him, but still pretty strong. Good receiver. He was split out wide. I think I charted it like 18%, 20% of his snaps, something like that. He was beating corners, like getting separation against corners. Not just like he wasn't just running 9 routes out there. I mean, they would use him a little more creatively than that. I think there's one team, the Bills had a meeting with him. They had him in 2-3 weeks ago, and that's just like stuck in my mind because they've been wanting a pass down, like a pass catching back. They obviously wanted to sign J.D. McKissick. It didn't work out. I think James Cook makes a ton of sense for a team like the Bills that desperately want and need a passing down back with a ton of juice, and Cook's that.
Danny Kelly had a great comp for him. It was like if Dalvin Cook had a little brother. So he's not only his younger brother, but he's also his little brother. Definitely lacking Dalvin Cook's rocked up frame. So you brought up Buffalo, and I think we should spend some time talking about landing spots. I'm not seeing too many amazing landing spots. Like there's Atlanta, which I think is the best spot, but it would be a significantly less best spot for someone like Kenneth Walker with pass catching question marks, because that's going to be a bad team. So if you're not catching passes, you're going to be game script sensitive. That's not a good offensive line. So it's really going to hurt you. But Breece Hall, using the passing game as an extension of the run that helps mitigate the offensive line concerns. If you're losing, he's still, getting targets while the team goes pass heavy. And then the other spot is Buffalo, which I've waffled back and forth on, because for years it was the narrative, Josh Allen doesn't target running backs and he vultures all the rushing touchdowns to himself. But then we saw the tail end of last season and in the postseason, Devin Singletary, a full-on bell cow and a top 3 easy fantasy running back. So, maybe that is a really exciting spot. But outside of that, it's really tough for me to come up with meaningful takeaways. And one thing I'll say is, so draft capital is one of the most predictive variables at every position, but landing spot is super overrated, except for with running backs. And I mean, it's just it's sort of obvious. This is never going to happen. But imagine if Pittsburgh drafts Breece Hall, right? It's clearly, Kenneth Walker, wherever he goes, should be ahead of him. But I'm not seeing too many great landing spots. I don't know if you guys have any ideas.
Houston doesn't have a running back. Obviously, they're going to stink. So is Atlanta, but there's plenty of opportunity there. I think Buffalo's a landing spot where you think a guy could come in on a good team and immediately contribute. And I've got a sneaky one, guys.
Ooh.
You gotta take here, Graham.
We might have the same sneaky one. Go ahead.
Baltimore.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
Dobbins and Edwards both coming off serious injuries. Yeah. They had to piecemeal it together, and that team's going to run the football.
Yeah.
Justice Hill stinks. They hated Tyson Williams. That's a sneaky one for me is Baltimore. So obviously, Graham, you had a different one.
Yeah, no, who they might like is Tyler Algier. North-south, just go get it, be a hammer. Yeah. He's kind of like Gus Edwards in that sense. Mine is your Birds, Joe.
Yeah, they could always the Eagles are a team that could draft a running back every year.
They can't be convinced on Miles Sanders and
it's his last year of his rookie deal. Gainwell, there's been some groundswell that they want to get him the ball more, but we know what Gainwell is, right? He's not, and he's also not a bell cow. So they have. By the way, they have 5 picks in the top 101 picks. They could draft, but they're also a team that's funny. It's you look at their depth chart and you're like, okay, it's Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, and Kenneth Gainwell, and you're like, if they don't draft a running back, they can play with that, So that is a sneaky one. But my sneaky one was definitely Baltimore. I know people are going to say Seattle, which also makes sense because I know they re-signed Rashad Penny, but you can't trust him, and Chris Carson might never play again.
Yeah. Yeah, Penny's new contract is like heavily incentive laden. Like he can make $10 million next year if he stays healthy and balls out, which he looked awesome at the end of last year. But yeah,
he did. Yeah, but you're looking at the depth charts, and a team who could draft one is Detroit, because I heard tale that Jamal Williams, as much as everybody loves him, he was out of shape last year, and they might view DeAndre Swift almost as like a supercharged James Cook, the way we just talked about James Cook. So that's a team that could draft a back for sure. New Orleans could draft a back, but you're not gonna. I think Arizona's definitely drafting a back.
Yeah, I mean they just
Connor, but
yeah, they have no depth. Eno's tiny. Benjamin is freaking tiny. I think they'll draft like one of these depth guys for sure.
Yeah, they'll draft they could draft Isaiah Spiller or or one of the because Connor was good in the passing game last year. They could draft one of these depth guys, and let's get to somebody who's from there. Ooh, good transition, Joe. Rashad White. This is a guy that Scott, you, Graham, and Cosell all liked. I've heard tale that NFL teams might not be as high on him. I think Dane Brugler might have said that, but he pops on tape and he pops in the stat model, Scott.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. Hyper efficient. He's another transfer. Hyper athletic, one of the most athletic running backs in this class. Really like his pass catching upside. So he had over 90 rushing yards per game and over 40 receiving yards per game last season. That was one of just 5 seasons by a Power 5 running back since 2013. The entire list: Rashad White, Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon, Christian McCaffrey, Todd Gurley. And that just sort of gets the juices flowing. That's exciting to me. He one of the best ever yards per route run seasons in PFF history, 3rd best, behind only Curtis Samuel, who later became a wide receiver, and Travis Etienne. By missed tackles forced per reception, only 5 running backs, which includes Alvin Kamara and Najee Harris, ever bested his 2021 season. Among the class, he ranks either 1st or 2nd best in yards from scrimmage per game, receiving yardage market share, yards per route run, yards per target, yards after contact per reception, et cetera, et cetera. So really impressive numbers all across the board, and especially as a pass catcher, which gets me as a bell cow fan excited. So I dug into that narrative that NFL teams were a lot lower on him. Lance Zierlein had him pretty low. Dane Brugler had him pretty low, hinted that NFL teams were even lower on him than he was. This was like February when he had him like RB 16. And the only thing I could come up with, and I guess this is sort of a meaningful point, is that his offensive coordinator, Zach Hill, has only ever had an RB1 who has super smashed. So 2016, he had Jeremy McNichols, who put up better rushing and receiving numbers than Rashad White's 2021. Alexander Madison, comparable numbers. George Holani in 2019, comparable numbers. And Rashad White's volume was a lot lower than a lot of those running backs, which maybe brings back, okay, is he actually a bell cow? But he was also the most hyper efficient of that group. So that would be the only concern. But I mean, I really like him. He's my RB4. So yeah, I'm excited about him.
What did you see, Graham? Because Cosell was really excited about him. Cosell flat out said, my sense is he'll be off the board on day 2, which, as we know, is a pretty premium pick for a running back.
I saw a day 3 guy. I think I mentioned Yeah, I mentioned this to Scott, man, but his vision was really bad, like really, really bad. Like he would run into the back of his offensive lineman when there was like a clear cutback. I have him in RB9 strictly because of all the reasons Scott mentioned. Was as a pass catcher, he's a very good pass catcher. He also popped as top in the class for me in yards per route run. Was pretty good in missed tackles forced too, but I don't see him as a primary runner. I see him and Isaiah Spiller kind of similarly. They're built totally differently, and I think White's a much better athlete. But Yeah, I think they're both change of pace passing down guys.
Let's see here. Scott, Tyler Allgeier, your model liked, he was a bell cow. But I don't know if the tape really pops on a guy like that.
Mm-mm.
I don't know. Graham would have to speak to that, but I thought he was at least a little exciting, a little interesting. He's another one of these running backs who played linebacker briefly in college. I think Abram Smith was another, and then Javonte Williams played running back linebacker in high school. Troy Anderson, freak athlete linebacker, also played running back in college for a little bit. Just like an interesting trend that's going on there, but also maybe speaks to some untapped upside. Just only 2 real full seasons playing running back, and he was hyper productive. He was hyper efficient, even in spite of losing Zach Wilson and his offensive coordinator. He was the entirety of the offense last year, and he was really productive, really efficient in spite of that, and in spite of his offensive line. He's another guy I'm going to have above Isaiah Spiller, but probably behind Robinson, then White, then Pierce. I keep going back and forth with him and Pierce, but probably one spot behind Pierce.
Yeah, I've got Algier ahead of Spiller as well. He's at 7. I've got Spiller at 8 and White at 9. Yeah, you just know exactly what you're getting with Algier, man. He gets exactly. God bless you. Good Lord, you're exercising some demons there, man. Algier's just he just gets what's blocked all the time. He doesn't have a ton of bursts, doesn't have any long speed. I don't think he's a great receiver. But yeah, he's kind of in that mix, I think, with like Jerome Ford and Brian Robinson, is these guys who have good vision, they're good inside, they're big, and we know that translates to the NFL immediately. So I've got them just naturally boosted a little higher in my ranks.
The more I watch, this is Cosell. The more I watch, it's Algier or Allgeier?
I think it's Algier.
Okay. The more I watched Algier, the more I saw a realistic comparison to Jordan Howard when he came out of Indiana in 2016.
I like that comp a lot.
As a 5th round pick. Yeah. Another back who came to mind was Alexander Madison coming out of Boise State when the Vikings drafted in the 3rd round of the 2019 draft, which is interesting with that. So those are 2 guys. One was a day 3 pick, the other a day 2 pick, both of whom have shown the ability to be positive fantasy options when given the chance.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's this class, dude. I think there's
it's who gets the chance, right?
Yeah, there's 7 or 8 guys that are on that like Madison, Wayne Gallman talent spectrum. Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, there's multiple guys in this class who Cosell said there's little mystery to what he is, and he says that he says it for Snoop Connor, he says it for Kevin Harris, like those guys who, man, if he lands in the right spot and just one day ends up getting 8 games to show his stuff, might end up getting a second contract in the NFL. It's kind of like that with these guys. I don't know, Scott, if your model ran this guy, but I do want to throw it out. First and foremost, Jerome Ford, Cosell comped him to Kareem Hunt. There is a landing spot dependent guy. Wow, that's strong. There is a landing spot dependent guy.
I like Jerome Ford too. I didn't see Kareem Hunt though. He's got better than expected speed, but he's got like no wiggle. Like he's a north-south guy.
Yes. Well, Cosell would not be looked at as naturally shiftier and elusive, but he has enough agility to complement his downhill style. So
he's got some boost in him. I like Jerome Ford a little bit. I got him at 6, but again, like
how about this one? Because I honestly had heard nothing about him until Cosell sent his profile to me this week. Graham might know, Scott, but can you guess this? He is a Power 5 big time. I'll even say he's SEC just for you. He has all the running traits you want in an NFL foundation back, and there is no question he can carry a volume load at the next level for a team that wants a feature back to get 16 to 20 carries a game.
Wow. Is it Zamir White?
No.
Good guess, though.
Yeah, it is a good guess.
I
hate to put it is Tyrion Davis Price of LSU.
Okay. Interesting.
Graham, you haven't charted him yet.
Mm-mm.
Scott, did your model? What did your model show on him?
Model didn't love him on first pass. He was one of those bubble guys who I went back and forth on whether or not I should write up, and like clearly I should based on this. And I know some of the top mock draft guys have said NFL teams are pretty high on him.
Yeah.
Really good.
You go ahead.
Decent athleticism, ran a 4.48 40. I have him RB 15, but like really close with Ty Chandler, who had one spot ahead of him.
Yeah, so Davis Price, he kind of fits the profile of like one of these. He might go before like 4 or 5 guys who we talked about on this show.
Yeah,
Like,
I think he will.
If an NFL team really likes him, yeah.
Yeah, he seems like he's an NFL circles kind of guy. I know Daniel Jeremiah is really plugged in. He had him like really high, like in his top 120, 115, something like that. And I was reading through Bob McGinn's like scouting notebook where he like all the anonymous scouts come in and spew their nonsense. But yeah, he was. It seems like all the scouts were a little higher on Davis Price too. So he's someone I'm going to go back and chart when I have a little time, probably next week.
6'2", so like 4.48 at that size, like good athleticism, physical. Passing game, they didn't throw him the ball, but Kenneth Walker, they didn't. I almost wonder, reading his profile, if a team that really likes Kenneth Walker but doesn't pull the trigger in the second round would also really like Tyrion Davis Price.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
And I think Walker's more shifty. I think Cosell called him a jazz musician. Like he's an improviser. But yeah, Davis Price. I think a team's gonna like him. He's gonna get his name called a little bit earlier than people might think. I'm going to be honest, guys. What's up, Graham?
No, real quick. I know we're going on an hour. I wanted to ask Scott about 2 guys, lowering guys, Keonta Ingram and Tyler Beatty. Do you have like any? I don't know if you wrote them up.
I just got Beatty's profile from Costa.
Yeah, I just like them as pass catchers, but I haven't charted them. But I was just curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, Model didn't really like Ingram. It really liked Tyler Beatty. He's sort of a one-year wonder, and there was a lot of one-year wonders in this class, but it was like a ridiculously impressive one season. One of just 4 Power 5 running backs to handle 250-plus carries, 50-plus receptions in a single season, over 160 yards from scrimmage per game. That's an elite mark. Only 14 other running backs in the Power 5 have eclipsed that mark. Since 2014, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook, Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, Leonard Fournette, J.K. Dobbins. That's over half the list right there. They averaged 2.62 yards per route run. That ranks 6th best since 2014, with only Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, Curtis Samuel, and 2 running backs still in school to beat that mark. So obviously, yeah, really like his bell cow upside. He's a little small, below average athlete, but that gets me excited.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and watch him because I kind of saw the same things. He's definitely for sure.
Here we go.
Also has a sweet ass name. You can just call him.
Was outstanding in the conventional screen game, but he ran angle routes and wheel routes and was featured split from the formation running tunnel screens. The only issue with Beatty as a receiving back is that he must improve his pass protection, or that will limit his ability to get on the field despite his higher level receiving traits. As I watched Beatty, especially as a receiver, Kenneth Gainwell came to my mind. I think there are similarities as runner receiver backs, and they will likely be used in the same way in the NFL.
I think that makes sense. I kind of disagree with
Gainwell was a 5th-round pick, by the way.
That makes sense, but I kind of disagree with Cosell's point on pass protection. Like, if you have a specialized role as a pass catcher, you're going to be running routes 90% of the time. You're not going to be protected.
Yeah. I think that is one of the reasons Gainwell was kept off the field this year. Remember, Jalen Hurts hurt his ankle when Gainwell blew a block. So,
Gainwell's tiny, man. He's just a skinny dude. Yeah. But,
there is anyway, I have got to piss like a racehorse. I'm just going to throw that out there. Scott, let's reconvene after the draft to talk tight end landing spots. I know there's we're not going to see a tight end drafted in the 1st round. It's not going to happen. Like, we'll have 3 go on day 2.
Real quick, Joe, I know you said you got to go, but Trey McBride, where do we think he goes? Because his over-under right now is like 51.5.
Yeah, he's going to go in the 2nd round. Scott,
Peter King had Cincy taking him as a luxury pick in round 1.
Oh, interesting.
So awesome.
The guy who really warms my cockles is Jelani Woods. Who I mean is a freak show. That guy, Cosell told me specifically, he's like, because I asked him specifically in our wide receiver show, I said, there aren't a lot of great big end tight ends, but he said he is going to be like eyes peeled waiting to see who drafts Jelani Woods, because it'll give a huge indication of what kind of team views him. Because Jelani Woods, if you just look at pure athleticism, this is a guy who was a high school quarterback. You look at him and you're like, okay, if there's somebody in this class who becomes a dynasty cheat code, it might be that guy.
Yeah. Well, Joe, this is for our show in a couple hours, but Jelani Woods, I sent this to Scott yesterday. I was asking, who do you think is the second tight end taken? And Jelani Woods is plus 600. So I might be snagging that.
I mean,
Greg Barfield and Jeremy Ruckert are ahead of him as the second.
And Charlie Kolar, by the way, is a really good prospect too, depending on what you're looking for at your tight end. I think Charlie Kolar is more of your Gesicki type of guy.
Okay.
Right.
That's Wes Huber's tight end 1, which I at least thought was interesting. But no, I have a very clear top 2 with Trey McBride, a tier unto himself. I really like him. I really, really like him. And then Greg Dulcich, a tier unto himself at tight end 2. Jelani Woods, hyper freak athlete. I comped him to basically Albert O 2.0. And this was before the trade that sent Noah Fant to Seattle. But I meant that as a compliment because I've always liked Albert O. And then I have Wes's tight end 1, Greg Dulcich,
Charlie Kolar.
Tight end 3. Don't sleep on Daniel Bellinger either. He's another freak athlete. He was voted the top tight end for his team at the Senior Bowl, ahead of Greg Dulcich, and Isaiah Likely. Isaiah Likely is another really exciting name to me. It reminds me of the Texans tight end from a season ago, where it's really impressive efficiency and production, but certainly an unideal athletic profile.
All right, guys, I really got to go. Graham, you and I and Tom Brawley will be on at 6 p.m. to follow. Essentially, we're going to follow up on our last show, which was draft props, and we're going to examine what's changed in the last few days as we head into the NFL draft tomorrow. Scott, you're going to be on with Wes and Nick tomorrow night with some special guests, talking first round of the NFL draft. That's going to be a blast. I'm going to be on with Graham and Tom on Friday night. Scott, you're going to be back with Wes and Tribby on Saturday. We're going to be all over the damn place. Oh, and by the way, we have PGA. So be sure to tune in. We got the Final Points PGA show for the Mexico Open with Dom Centurino and Matt Gannon. That is tonight, and it is free every week at 8 p.m. on YouTube. We want to get eyeballs on our PGA content because it is awesome. We're trying to build some stars here. These guys are great. Follow at Fantasy PTS PGA Twitter handle if you're interested in fantasy golf. Our golf product is really, really strong. We need eyeballs on it. It is awesome. So for Scott Barrett and Graham Barfield, my name is Joe Dolan. I hope you enjoyed this discussion of the running backs. And guys, guess what? In 3 days, everything we said is going to be blown up anyway. So look forward to that. Yeah. Woo-hoo. Please let Breece Hall go somewhere where there's not an established back. Guys, awesome. Awesome talking to you. Thank you, Kukanis behind the glass, the hardest working man in the fantasy football industry. Goodbye, everybody.